It's sometimes difficult to imagine how it may have been here during the First War. Prior to the war, these buildings were newly built. The Grand, the Metropole and the Manor House had their heyday in the early 1900s and became a major social centre, mainly due to the patronage of Edward VII, who was a regular visitor, and he came not only with the Queen but his friend Alice Keppel, and became famous for that, particularly as the King opened the ballroom in this building. The Grand took the first dance with the Queen and the second with Alice Keppel. So you can well imagine that the start of the First War was really a very major event here. One of the earliest things that happened was the flight of the Belgian refugees. When Germany advanced through Belgium, many of the Belgians who felt threatened escaped by boat to Folkestone. And we have a famous painting currently being restored here in this building, painted by one of the refugees, which depicts, among others, the King in the centre of the picture. The Folkestone was regarded as a safe haven. The battles were going on not that far away. France is only 20 miles from here, and on a clear day you can easily see the French coast. Not only that, if you perambled along the Lys, you could hear the guns firing on the continent, and at night you saw the perpetual flashes of from their muzzles and other items being exploded. So Folkestone was, for many of the servicemen, regarded as their first safe refuge. Virtually everybody who fought on the Western Front travelled by boat from Folkestone Harbour, which you can see from this area, from the Grand and the Metropole. It's said that there were 10 million crossings for service personnel and their support staff, and it's rather a salutary reminder that only 8 million came back, although those who were injured were normally transported via Dover, not Folkestone, so that those fresh troops going out from Folkestone wouldn't see injured soldiers coming back, which would be damaging to their morale. These buildings carried on in some respects as they had before the war. The Grand had established a reputation as one of the finest hotels in the country, along with the Metropole next door. And when star ratings were introduced, these two buildings were two of only five-star hotel buildings outside London. The Grand was used obviously for military purposes, although the King of the Belgians actually stayed here and commuted by the ferries to the battlefronts in France and a small head that was maintained in Belgium, and became renowned among the Belgians for his sterling war work. But this building was used to a goodly extent as a hospital for injured soldiers, and particularly officers. When I was first here, which was nearly 40 years ago, I was frequently spoken to by people who'd actually recuperated in the Grand during the First War, and would often attribute their survival, indeed their life, to the treatment that they had here within the Grand. The Manor House next door was donated by Lord Radnor, who was the ground landlord of the larger part of West Folkestone, for the war effort and to become a military hospital. Initially with 90 beds, but they're rapidly expanded to 120. Again, many servicemen owed their lives to the treatment that they were given there. They treated, over the course of the First War, about or little over 2,000 English servicemen, 1,000 Canadian servicemen, nearly 200 Australian servicemen, and also over 100 Belgians. And they were very proud of the fact that only 6 servicemen died while in charge of the Manor House Hospital. The Metropole, by contrast, was largely used by the WRAC, Women's Royal Army Corps, and you can see maybe from that why this area remained one of the social centres, particularly as the manager of the Grand was very generous in giving afternoon tea parties to the service personnel who were here in Folkestone. But the Grand also became a centre for marshalling up troops on the leas outside, whereas rest camps had been built along the larger stretch of the leas from the town to the Manor House. The area outside the Grand was left open, and it was an area where troops were sometimes marshalled, preparatory to marching along the leas, 1.5 miles along the leas and down the slope road to the harbour. And it is the slope road that is particularly remembered as part of the First War commemorations. That was so after the end of the First War, when an elaborate war memorial was built at the top of it, and that is where the 10,000 men went down on their last sight of Britain, on the last touching of the soil, and very often, of course, their first when they returned. That is why that is an iconic area for Folkestone. But these buildings survived that war. They were out of shelling range, and bombing only came about right at the end of the war. In fact, one of the worst bombing atrocities took place in Folkestone when Crowded Shopping Centre had bombs dropped on it. But this was a relative haven of peace and the closest one to the Western Front.